And it is so empowering to be able to not have that have to mean a whole bunch of stuff about me, to have that not have to mean a whole bunch of stuff about him. That's like being able to release the weight of that story is incredible. Welcome to the Happiness and Progress podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I'm an Emmy award-winning journalist, international speaker, mom, wife, and you know what I like to say, just a person looking for more joy in the everyday. This is a space where you belong, not because you earned it, not because of your title, your paycheck, or number of kids you have, but just because you are human and you are good. Here we explore progress over perfection, emotional and spiritual wellness, and how to relish the good parts of life that coexist with the not so good parts. This is Happiness in Progress. I am so glad you're here because today we're going to talk about reframing our negative stories. And I had this aha moment this week when I was looking at an Instagram post that showed the depiction of a woman kind of evolving from 2023 to 2024 to 2025. And in that first year, 2023, it showed a woman just, hands on her face crying. 2024, she was sitting there with like growth happening. You could kind of see the roots, you can kind of see some plants. And then 2025, she's surrounded by flowers. She's in a garden. And I just really identified with this image. It was so beautiful. It's still on my Instagram page if you want to go check it out. So as I'm looking at this, I thought, why do I resonate with this so closely? What is the difference between 2023 and 2025 for me in my life that would make it, the difference between crying and sitting in a garden? And I realized it is getting control of those negative stories, reframing the negative stories. And honestly, when you do this, you're really able to take control of your life again. Because when we live in our negative stories, it really halts our progress. We really cannot move forward when we're stuck there, just living in a story that our mind has created, honestly, without our permission. I guess there's, to some extent, we're consenting to our minds going off the rails. But basically what we're going to do in this episode is take back that control. We will no longer consent to our mind going out of control. And yes, it will continue to do so, especially in the beginning as we're practicing regaining control over our stories. But we do all of this with grace, and we're going to do this in a non-judgmental way. Okay, so first I want to talk about what are the two main steps we can do to reframe those negative stories. So I find that our emotional state within a moment can then go tell a huge story. So part of what I was dealing with in 2023 was one of my children who was really struggling at school and would have kind of large meltdowns. I've talked a little bit about this, and his various special needs, but I'm going to try to keep this more on my story rather than trying to tell his story, because this is part of my story too. And I also always, want him to know that he is doing the very best he can with the tools that he has, and he's continuing to grow, and we're really proud of that growth. But when I would get that call from the school, I would drive to the school and I would just have so much more going on than just, I have to go get him from school, right? Because I am telling a very emotional story about what's happening, what it means about me, what it means about the future. I'm just spiraling. So I'm driving to the school and I'm thinking, wow, I'm a terrible parent. What are other people going to think about my parenting? What does this mean for my child? What does this mean for the future of him at the school? What does this mean for him in 20 years? What does this mean for my job? Just totally spiraling on myself and all of the things that this could or could not mean, what it is for the future. And it's just not a helpful train of thought to go down. So this is tip number one. Let's stay in the present. So in the present moment, we do not need to give what's happening a story. What's happening is my child needs support at school. So I'm going to get myself to school. This does not need an additional story to go with it. That story can be about my parenting. That story can be about my child. That story can be about what this means for my work, for school. What am I going to do next? How am I going to handle this? I can't handle this. I'm the worst. I'm a terrible parent. This ties back to what I did wrong on this day in my parenting. Like that is just a spiral that does not exist within the present moment. So instead, let's bring it all back to the present moment. And this is a practice, and you may start to like slide into your typical thought patterns because they're like literally neural pathways in your brain that are like, this is the way we go. Remember, it's time to shame ourselves. It's time to add the story of shame to what's happening. And so as I kind of gain control of the story, now I get those calls. I get them less frequently. And as I drive to the school, I just try to stay in the present moment without giving the present moment meaning. We have this attachment to giving everything meaning. Some things just are. Some things can just be. We do not have to add additional storylines to these various things. So as I'm driving to the school, I may think, I always have a little bit of anxiety, always a little bit nervous about safety, etc. And so I'm thinking of those things. As my brain goes off to think about things like, wow, I'm a bad parent, I remind myself I'm not telling myself that story. We're going back to the present. What is happening in this moment? My child needs support. That is what this means. What's happening means my child needs support. That is it. When you stay in the present, you can release fortune telling. You are not a fortune teller. You don't know what this means about anything. What does this mean for 20 years from now? You don't know. What does this mean for your job? You don't know. One of the things I can spiral on when this was happening, was, what does this mean for my job? I'm leaving my job and I got to go take care of this. My boss is going to be mad at me, blah, 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 blah. And yet nobody was mad at me. Instead, like, release that for this moment and let's address it if and when it comes up. At that point, you can say, oh, I'm in the present moment now, and this is what's happening with my boss. Let me see if I can find a solution. You see the difference between let's make this moment mean a whole bunch of stuff versus this moment is happening. It is a lot to it's a big shift to be able to release that. The other part of this is, so we're going to live in the present. We're not going to try to do fortune telling. We're not living in the past about what this means about who we are, our parenting, etc. We're not living in the future about what does this mean for the future? Because that's a lot. That is a lot of storytelling to attach to one moment that might take, 10 to 15 minutes to resolve, right? The next piece of this is, let's stick with the facts. I always tell my kids this, let's stick with the facts. So when I'm driving, I might say, I'm going to lose my job. That's not a fact. I mean, it could be a fact if you've already had this conversation with your boss a million times and he says you're on the line. But, for me in that moment in 2023, that was not a fact. The fact was I had concerns about it. I was worried about it. But the fact is not I am going to lose my job. Also, the fact is not I am a terrible mom. The fact is I feel like a terrible mom. Do you see that? It's a tiny extra word you're adding, but it's very, very different. It's a very big mindset shift from I feel like a terrible mom to I am a terrible mom. Do you see that huge difference? Even just adding that you feel it. One, it's good because you're acknowledging your feelings. I think that's really important that we do that. But two, you're not telling yourself you're a bad mom because you're not. We do this with so many things. I am not lovable. I'm worthless. I don't have good ideas. I shouldn't contribute. All of those, we say them as if they're facts about ourselves, but it's a really big mindset shift if instead we can say, right now I'm feeling like I'm not good enough. Because that opens the door to exploration and curiosity instead of just like, oh, I'm the worst. Do you see the difference? Okay. So we're going to stick with the facts. The facts are I'm feeling a certain kind of way. The facts are I'm going to help my child. The facts are I am worried, but so all of this might seem kind of passive to you. And if you've been listening for a long time, you know I am a problem solver. So I am not telling you not to problem solve things. I'm just telling you to get out of this emotional turmoil of telling stories. So, in all of that, I was also, getting appointments, reading books, finding out how to get tools and support for my child. And all of that has helped tremendously. So now in 2024, 2025, when I'm needed at my child's school, it doesn't mean anything. It just is. It's just a moment. I just drive there, I manage it, and I move on with my life. And it is so empowering to be able to not have that have to mean a whole bunch of stuff about me, to have that not have to mean a whole bunch of stuff about him. That's like being able to release the weight of that story is incredible. Okay. I want to give another example because sometimes I find if you're not a parent of a child with special needs, you have a hard time like understanding what that might be like. So I want to give this example, which I think is pretty universal. I was on a Zoom call and I was part of a group making a decision, and we were trying to come up with a solution to a pretty sensitive topic. And it was my turn. Well, I had an idea. So I came off mute and I was like, well, I think we're making too big of a deal about this. And I don't even think we have to have this conversation with this particular individual. This was my idea. And the other guy, another guy on the call, gets off mute and says, well, some of us are grown-ups here. So we are going to have the conversation. And I'm like, oh my gosh, please get off. I get off mute. Let me please continue on to dig myself a hole and climb into it where I will stay forever in my shame spiral about how I'm an idiot. I shouldn't have spoken up. I have bad ideas. I'm apparently not a grown up. I mean, the shame response, like your whole like body's like, oh my gosh, I have failed and I'm a idiot. Okay, so when we think about this scenario, and living in the present, because remember, I'm having this whole emotional turmoil on this story about what an idiot I am. The first thing I can do is live in the present. This moment can just be. Okay. It just is. It doesn't mean anything about me. It doesn't mean anything about me and my future with this group. It doesn't mean I'm an idiot and that I have no good ideas. It just happened. And so here are the true things about this moment. So we'll go into the reality. Let's stick with the facts. The facts are, yeah, the guy was kind of rude to me. He did not need to say what he said in the way that he said it. But this is my inner work, not his inner work. So for me, I can acknowledge that he was rude. And honestly, if I worked with him regularly, I could even continue on to have a conversation and a repair and that we didn't work together too often that I felt like we needed to do that. But so that was that. He was rude. It didn't make me feel good. I felt embarrassed about my response. That's true. And what else? Another fact would be this group didn't love my idea. Okay. That can be true without meaning that I'm an idiot. See that disconnect? See like how we can just stay in the present. We can just let it be. Those are just facts of the situation. We can just let it be. It just is. It doesn't mean anything about us. We should speak up again. We are not dumb and we do have good ideas. Okay. When we are able to walk away from these negative storylines that we tell, and I think I've talked about confirmation bias. We're always looking, like whatever our negative story is, we're always looking for something to prove that it's true. So negative story is I shouldn't speak up in meetings. And you're like, oh, just going to pocket that information. There's another piece of evidence that I'm an idiot. And then you just keep looking for those and you just keep piling them on. But this way, we don't add that as our confirmation bias. We don't add that to reasons I'm an idiot. And instead, we just let it be and we move on with our lives. It allows us to take control of our life. It allows us to progress. It allows us to take risks, to have courage, to feel better about who we are and who we're becoming. I think the last thing I will mention is one of the hardest things about rewriting our own stories is that other people around us really like to keep us within our stories. this was one of the most challenging things with me with my situation with my child. I'm not going to go into the details, but just know it's really ugly. It was not nice. And there were a lot of parents who had a lot of perceptions of me and other parents with kids with special needs. And I did have to sit there and witness them talking about that. And that was very, very challenging. And so the big question is, when you're ready to evolve from telling these negative stories and other people are holding you to those stories, how can you step out of this? I think we also see this a lot with families. You know, you've evolved and you've grown, but maybe your siblings from childhood are wanting to keep you in that spot of childhood, right? So what can you do? How can you continue to get out of that negative mindset? How can you reframe your negative story when other people don't want you to reframe it? You just got to let it go. I wish I had a better. I just you can't shake a person and be like, "I am not who you think I am." You just have to release it. And it's really, really challenging. And when you're doing this work for yourself, you have to sometimes I even say it out loud, like, I release the perception you have of me. I release this idea of who you think I am because my child did XYZ, or because I said XYZ in a meeting. I have to release this because it is not serving me, and it's not serving the way I'm reframing the negative story that I have been telling myself and that apparently you have decided to say about me. And that's all you can do. That is really all you can do. But I find that even using those words is, I release it. I cannot control it. Even verbally saying that out loud can be helpful. Top 2 tips: stay in the present, stick with the facts. Don't let yourself spiral out of control with a storyline that doesn't belong to you anymore. So stick with me. Make sure to subscribe, because next week I have Rickson Gracie coming on the podcast. Yes, he's a jujitsu legend, and I am so excited that he came on. He just wrote this new book, Comfort in Darkness, and he talked about his Parkinson's disease. You can imagine having a career that involved strength and your physical body, and then suddenly being hit with Parkinson's. We're going to talk about that, and I just loved having this conversation with him. So make sure you're here for that. And I want to thank you for being here on Happiness in Progress.